Seconds. Welcome, everybody, to a special episode of the Horror Syndicate Live. Of course, this is not the Horror Syndicate Discourse. That is a Tuesday night show. And of course, you'll be joining us on Tuesday to talk about the Blair Witch films, Legacy, which I'm very excited to talk about. Sorry we missed you on Tuesday, but Nate had a prior engagement. So tonight we have the panel. We're going to talk about some things about life as a horror fan and some of the scrutiny we may get, which I know a lot of us have. We've got Nathan Thomas Milliner with us tonight,
Hey, everybody.
and then Seth T. Miller. I noticed you changed your name.
Hey everyone, what's up?
What's up, Andre?
So, hey, Andre, how you doing, man? If you see the title, the topic of what we're talking about tonight, and the picture of the girls from Carrie, bullying poor Carrie in the locker room after she has her period. We kind of want to talk about how some of us are treated as horror fans, and there is a sense of being an outcast at times. I know that in the past there are things, not even just horror in general, that I felt like I've had to hide from people. Hey, Brad, how you doing? And it's bullshit, really. But yeah, I think you're right, Mark. I think it's better on YouTube. Thank you for joining us, everybody. So let's dive in. I'm not sure if you guys want to get into personal experiences, but there are people who look at horror fans, kind of in a different, different way. Like I was telling you before the show, I recently had somebody kind of pull some bullshit. I was jiving with this girl, talking to her that it was introduced to me through a friend, and maybe talking about getting together, go on a date sometime. And then she looked at my Instagram and ghosted me essentially, and told me, "Oh, he's just way into horror, and I'm just not into that stuff." And it's like, fuck her. That's what the fuck. Just I'm way into horror. Who cares, right? So let's talk about it, guys. And anybody who's watching, please sound off and let us know if you've had to deal with some bullshit, like just wearing a horror T-shirt. I like Italian horror, and this is probably not the proper T-shirt to wear, but I have a T-shirt that says Gates of Hell, which is City of the Living Dead, and has Father Thomas, who's been hung, and on it. And I went to see my dad one day, and he introduced me to some people, and boy, I got the looks. This is your son? So, I mean, I get it says Gates of Hell on the shirt, but come on. Anyway, so Seth, how we doing?
Doing good.
Nathan, I know you're doing good too. Let's what do you guys think? Let's hear some stuff from you guys. Who wants to go?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think any horror fan has dealt with those prejudgments of what you're into, or like you said, what you're wearing. I mean, I think it goes with anything. I was watching something earlier about perceptions of things and how they could be switched. This guy was talking about he was doing a TED talk, and he had this picture of a pug, and he said everybody went, "Oh, so everybody loves a puppy." He goes, "And people like kittens, but what if I did this?" And he goes, "Because the thing is, like when you're young, you start to see things a certain way. So you see a puppy or a kitten, and you know what they are." He goes, "But what if I did this?" And he took the pug and he changed it where there were cat eyes on the pug, and it automatically made it look a little creepy, like weird, like off. There's something wrong about that. It made you feel a certain way. That's kind of what horror does. They take things that aren't like the patterns that we're used to, and then they flip them or they turn them to make us feel uneasy about things. He goes, and the thing is, that is kind of what we don't really understand. Like that's kind of how, in some ways, racism works. When we see something that we're normally, but it's different, it's off. There's something different from us or what we're used to, and that's where the people have those kind of feelings towards it. So, And I think that's what it is. You know, if you walked in with your polo shirt on, no one's going to think that. But you got your Gates of Hell shirt, and they're like, "Oh, this guy is something wrong with him.
Something wrong with him.
Not normal."
Yeah.
There's that. Why would you wear that shirt? And you must be in Satan's army or something, or you must be a serial murderer. And it's like, no, I just like zombie movies. You know, well, why would you?
As Mark Graham says, they'll think you're deranged, right?
Yeah. Understand. Yeah, I mean that's the thing. Like they think that you're. I heard that a lot. I think a lot on the post today about. They think you're a serial killer or a potential serial killer, or you're gonna like. And it's like, no. I mean, look. I think it's safe to say that some people who enjoy this type of stuff might be questionable, but I think the majority of people that I've met aren't at all, and I think I think the idea that someone could watch a movie and without any pre-existing mental problem or some kind of mental problem going on already, go out and mimic it is not. I mean, basically, this is a huge industry with a huge fans. There would be killers everywhere if this was true. If we were all like horror movies make shitloads of money. Stephen King is one of the biggest selling novelists of his time.
Think about how many people are Horror Hound, Nate. Think about how many people go to a Horror Hound convention. I mean, those people should be killing people, right?
Yeah, we'd all be murderers, right? So
yeah, it's. I mean, speaking from past experience, when you're a horror fan as a kid, it's especially terrible because teachers will treat you differently and kids will spread rumors about you. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what we're talking about tonight. And it's a thing. I mean, some kids won't, because when I was a kid, you know, there are a lot of kids who thought it was cool that I had all these horror movies and let's go to Ray's house. We're going to watch a horror movie. And that was fine. But when the parents found out what they were doing at my house, they would call my mom, and I'd catch hell for that. Even though my mom was open to it, she never treated me any differently. She loved horror. I mean, we talked about it on Discourse plenty of times about her taking me. The first movie she ever took me to because she had to see Friday the 13th, and I was like 2 weeks old, you know. But my mom was always into it. But she'd catch hell, and then I'd catch hell from these conservative type parents that their kid shouldn't be, 11 years old watching horror movies. There's something wrong with your kid. There's nothing wrong with me. I like baseball too. I mean,
yeah.
So
it's such a complex thing in general because, like Nate said, there are people out there. Yeah, there are some people who have maybe some they're untreated for their illnesses, or maybe they've had some sort of trauma or whatever, and horror movies, and they may be more they may be more open to the influence, and and of course these bad seeds are what people focus on, and so then we as horror fans, we get generalized as being this type, and there's a lot of people who are very kind of narrow-minded too about the genre, where they don't know much about the horror movies. All they know is that their belief is that you watch a horror movie and you're going to become a serial killer, or you're going to go to hell, or all this other stuff. It's quite ridiculous, and it's something that's been going on for a long time. I mean, this goes back decades, and it's always been kind of a fascinating subject to me, especially. There's one thing in particular, which I'll probably mention a little bit later, in regards to a certain thing that happened in the 50s with a book called The Seduction of the Innocent, and how William Gaines, the publisher of EC Comics, had to go to court and kind of fight for horror against this dipshit Dr. Frederick Wertham, who wrote that piece of shit book. But it's a shame because we do get generalized as being sickos and weirdos, and it's like I had this conversation. I don't remember the context of this conversation, but a couple years ago, somehow it got brought up. Real life violence versus movies, and I despise real life violence. I can't stand it at all. Anyone who stabs someone or shoots someone is a giant piece of shit, and I have no respect for it, or whatever. But there's a difference between movies. Movies, I know it's fiction, it's fake. All these actors are fine. It's it's art to me. I like.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I prefer fiction that's high stakes and a little bit more intense and ultra violent. That's just the kind of stuff I like for escapism. It has nothing. I don't have a fantasy about it. I couldn't hurt someone like that.
Well, and there's a whole range of emotions you go through within the confines of a 90-minute horror movie, and I've seen studies, and there's a documentary called Why Horror, asking why you like horror. It's on, I believe it's on Shudder. It was at one point anyway, but the guy who's doing the documentary, who I can't remember his name offhand, he takes his mom in, who she always questioned why he was into horror, and it's actually good for you because your body releases these endorphins or something like that when you have a state of fear. It's actually healthy in a way. We do have a couple comments real fast. Stephen King has said that horror creates a safe place to explore dangerous emotions. Yeah. Some people feel compelled to explore these feelings, and there's a real depth in the art form. I mean,
yeah, it's like you said, it's a release of these natural aggressions and these dark sides of ourselves that if we didn't unleash, if we repress it, it's going to be even worse. So it's like we all have these things. I even talked about like pro wrestling. Pro wrestling, because I'm not really a big guy. I don't watch MMA. I don't watch boxing. I don't slow down at traffic accidents like Seth was saying. I don't like real life violence. I don't like seeing real people in pain and suffering. And I don't even watch surgery shows or anything like that. Like I just don't want to look at it because it's not my thing. It doesn't excite me. It doesn't entertain me. So, but like I said, like I was a fan of like pro wrestling back in like the late 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, where like the biggest guy in the world was Stone Cold Steve Austin. And like why did that guy skyrocket other than being awesome? Part of it was like people were vicariously living through that guy, because what did Stone Cold stand for? He's anti-establishment. He was telling his boss to go fuck himself every week. And who didn't want to tell their boss to go fuck themselves and pour beer on them and stun them? Like, who didn't want to do that? Every week they got to let that out of themselves, living through Stone Cold Steve Austin. So it's like, that's it. Like, and I don't say that like we don't live through Jason. Some people do. Some people identify with Jason, and Jason would attack the beautiful people, the pretty people, the popular people. He would, the people who were, getting down, while the nerds, we were watching nudie movies with Crispin Glover or whatever. But
teddy bear.
Teddy bear. But the thing about horror and why it goes back to like even further what Seth was talking about, how this goes back, like it's in our DNA, like just as human beings, because some of the earliest stories were those stories around the campfire saying, hey, don't go in the woods. Why? Because there's bears, there's wolves, there's predators, there's things that will hurt us. And you need to stay away from that. And these were stories to keep us away from that. And just by our nature as these creatures that we are, we had to learn the fight or flight thing of our screams and everything we do, our blood pressure going up, our heart's beating, all that stuff. That adrenaline is to protect us, to deal with dangers. It's even though we don't deal with it the same way they did, it's still in our DNA. It's still part of us. Just like it's this weird analogy, but like I was hearing about dogs, like female dogs will still do the humping thing because it's not about sex. It's about it's in their nature to do it, right? It's like we have this thing in our nature of how to respond to these. I think it's called like it's a part of our evolution. So it's like this evolutional fear system that we have, where we don't get to exercise it because we don't deal with the same fears and stresses that early man dealt with, which is dealing with the wildlife and dealing with this. But the other thing is how, look at what's going on right now with COVID. Like, this was one of the first times I can ever remember personally being terrified of disease, of getting sick. Like, but 100 years ago, if you got a cold or the flu, that could be a death note. Like, that was it. Like, if you got an infection, if you got a cut or a cold or a cough or whatever, that could mean death. So you had that fear of that, which we don't necessarily feel anymore, but we're now kind of feeling it, where it was like, oh wow, this thing could kill us. And so that's also part of like the stuff that you see in horror, which kind of reflects to the, like, especially in the zombie genre. Why are zombies so effective? Well, in zombies, it's the double thing, because you're dealing with a predator that wants to kill us and eat us. Meanwhile, it represents infection and sickness and a pandemic and all of that stuff going on. So basically, when we watch these horror films, it's working that muscle of fear, dealing with fear, practicing that fear that it's already in us to deal with, but we don't normally in normal life deal with. So when we watch horror movies, we're touching. It's kind of like an adrenaline junkie. We're getting close to danger without being in danger, and we're having those same feelings and those same, like, our heart starts pumping and our blood starts going, and we scream or we yell or we feel empathy for the characters on the screen. We feel like, get out of there. And that's the other part of being in the theater. It's a community thing too.
Yeah.
We get together and we root for each other. We root for the Dream Warriors to beat Freddy. We do, like, or we scream, get out of there, scream, so.
Well, you can relate to some of the characters.
Yeah.
You get to know some of the, like, I talk about character development constantly, and that's part of it. That's one of the great things about the Friday the 13th movies, even though they're all kind of not great. I love them, of course. In the Nightmare movies, you always can find somebody to relate to, except for Rod Lane. I never related to him. Well,
another thing too is, like, horror, usually, of course, a shitload of people die, but there's usually, for the most part, not always, but for the most part, good triumphs.
Yeah.
Whereas in real life, that's not the case. So.
Well, let me ask, why do we watch Star Wars or James Bond or, why is it horror that people tend to, like, scrutinize us for? I mean, it's just a movie generally, in my opinion. It's entertainment, right?
Yeah, I mean, you could argue that James Bond has killed more people than Freddy, Jason, and Michael combined.
Yeah.
Well, it's like when Wes Craven and Sean Cunningham were making Last House on the Left, I believe the story was that they went and saw The Good, the Bad, and Ugly together. And they got the idea of, what if we made a violent film that shows violence the way it actually happens, or the way it actually is? And, so he's like, well, the movie comes out and they think we're crazy. They think we're psychos. Like Wes Craven said, people wouldn't want him around his other people, their children. And it's like, but he said, they would think that I was glorifying violence, but I was showing violence as ugly and as real as it is. And you see that in the movie where, like, after they murdered the girls, they're like disgusted with themselves. It's one of the greatest parts of the movie, where they're like, they go off alone from each other and they wash the blood. They got blood on their hands and they're kind of like trying to get it off of themselves. And it's like they're dealing with real life violence, where he goes, that's not glorification of violence. That doesn't make violence look cool. It makes it look disgusting and off-putting, ugly. He goes, but Clint Eastwood is walking around and he's like, bang, 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 killing 4 guys with, boom, 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 boom. And people are like, yeah. It's like, there's no consequence. There's no empathy. There's nothing. It's like, we're rooting for violence in those situations, whether it's good or bad or not. Because I always thought about that. Like, I don't know if it's what it is in me, but like, I'd watch a movie where, Schwarzenegger kills like 20 henchmen. I'm like, those henchmen had families probably. I'm like, cared about them. They were kids, Yeah, Commando's like, there's 100 kids that were just murdered by this guy. All they're trying to do is guard this drug dealer, I guess. But it's like, but that's the thing. Like the movies that are acceptable far more glorify violence than the horror movies that we watch. But horror movies make it horrifying to watch. Make you feel uncomfortable watching it.
And you bring up a really great point too, Nate, because what I like about the horror genre, for the most part, not always, but it shows the actual consequences of violence. That's why I like the high stakes stuff, the R-rated stuff. I mean, this even goes to action movies too, because there's so many movies where someone could be in a car accident and they'll flip around dozens of times. They'll have a little trickle of blood on their forehead, and maybe they'll hold their arm like in Fast and the Furious or something like that.
Or the MCU.
Right. Where I prefer stuff like Die Hard or, or like a lot of horror movies, you know what I mean? Like where it's real in the way it depicts the violence. It's not going to sell you on the fact that you can go through all this shit and, be perfectly fine. You're going to be fucking, one of the things that kind of drives me nuts, especially like with I'm sorry if I'm going off track here. Like with like action movies and stuff like that, is people get into fist fights and there's no bruises, their knuckles are perfectly fine. You know what I mean? Like that stuff drives me nuts. I prefer for fiction to show the consequences, and I think that helps kind of make the audience relate more to the character, make him more believable as a person, and not just someone like, okay, I'm watching a character. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, like Ash, he gets his ass kicked, and like John McClane does in Die Hard. Ash goes through the ringer. John McClane goes through the ringer.
That's what made John such a great character, and why the new one sucks so bad is because they lost that important element to that character, which is him sitting there, pulling glass out of his feet, bleeding out, wanting to get away, doesn't want to be there, does not want to be the only person that can save his wife and these people. He wants their help. He wants them to come here and fucking arrest me, whatever. Get here, help us. And the fact that by the end of the movie, he's just a bloody, broken mess. Yeah. He's still moving because he has it. And that's what sells you with John McClane. I think it was Stallone said that Batman is what killed the 80s action star. I said, fuck that. It was John McClane, because John McClane was not a Superman. That's what killed the muscle-bound, I can carry trees around on my arm guy. It was John McClane, or even Martin Riggs. I mean, Martin Riggs was a lethal weapon. He was a lethal weapon. He was a badass, but he still had humanity to him. I mean, he's a guy who's putting a gun in his mouth early on in the movie. He's a broken person who's dealing with all kinds of emotions, and so to me, those guys killed that Schwarzenegger Stallone action star character that we saw in the 80s, not Batman.
This is an interesting point here. Horror movies also have had more of an influence on filmmakers than any type of Scorsese. I don't know about Scorsese, but Tarantino for sure. First of all,
well, they're influenced by everything, though.
I think you're right, and this is definitely a great comment. But like, look at Kill Bill Volume 1. That's got to have more blood than the average horror movie. I mean, she's cutting people in half, cutting heads off, just putting swords in heads. I mean, the Crazy 88s fight, holy shit.
Pulling an eyeball out.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. I mean, that's gorier than some of the horror movies, but that's okay, though, right?
Well, Quentin always makes an attempt to make you uncomfortable by showing those scenes, but making you laugh as well. Like if you see like the scene everybody walks out of Pulp Fiction back in '94 talking about was when Marvin gets shot in the face, because it's like just this explosion of awful violence. They've got blood and brains and skull all over them, but you laugh because like, oh man, I shot Marvin in the face. Like it's this funny, like what the fuck,
because it was an accident.
Yeah, or like Michael Madsen cutting the guy's ear off. I'm like, hey, do you hear that? What's going on? Yeah. He always wants to make you feel a little bit guilty for laughing, but you laugh because he's smart enough to couple that violence with that. So like you watch the Crazy 88 fight, it's ultra violent, but there's also a ton of humor in there.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And it's way over. It's very cartoonish as well.
Mm-hmm.
He rarely ever does extremely realistic violence.
Yeah, and well, at the same time,
on the other hand, very excruciating realistic violence.
Yeah, like when what's his name, Joe Pesci's going to get made at the end of Goodfellas, or at the end of God, that's, you know what I mean, it's in Casino, at the end of Casino when he when he gets his ass. Yeah, that fucking scene is more brutal than almost anything I've seen in horror. You know.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, so like, who's the weirdo? We're not. None of us are weirdos, first of all, and you know, going back to the point about people looking at us like we're deranged. I mean, it's just like any kind of fandom, in my opinion. I belong to a few of them. You know, I collect Star Wars stuff and horror stuff and comics and all this different stuff. But I don't see how it's any different from your average Star Wars fan. It's just you know, escapism. You know, horror and the horror community as a whole. Some of the most fun people you'll ever meet. That's one of the things that keeps me going to horror conventions, is meeting new people and seeing how many people just love horror. You see so many people wearing, you know, Michael Myers t-shirts or costumes, and you see all these vendors with all these great, you know, posters and whatever. And shit, Nate, you've made a career out of horror for the most part, between your art for Scream Factory and NECA. I won't call it NECA. And then
well, because of that,
and making films, you know, you made a Confession of Fred Krueger because of your love for the character, you know.
Yeah, I mean, because
check it out on YouTube, by the way.
Well, because of all, you know, doing like 60, 70 conventions and meeting hundreds or thousands of people over the years at these shows, these fans that they are just so happy. Mm-hmm. So excited to be there. So there's nothing. I can't say I've ever been terrified by anybody at a show. I don't care if they're standing there with blood and guts hanging out of their face. They're smiling because they're like this joy, and that's the thing. Like
I'm going to cut you off real fast because I have been terrified at a horror show. When I saw Lisa Wilcox for the first time, I was terrified to meet her. So anyway, go ahead.
Understandable.
Yeah, understandable.
For the right reasons, right? Yeah.
Sorry about that.
That's for fear of your insecurity, yeah. But well, you know, I don't remember where I was. But I forgot where I was.
I'm sorry. What were you saying?
How people
can we remind
people their joy. Well, you know, we talk about that. Like some people think that this stuff will corrupt you, will cause depression or whatever, and it's like it does the opposite. Art doesn't do that to us. Art lifts us. Art gives us a fucking reason to live and to breathe. Especially as a creator myself, if I didn't create, I would die. And that's true. It's like breathing to me. And so if I had no art in my life, whether it's watching a Marvel movie or a horror movie, those are the things that get me through. That's what's gotten people through COVID. Everybody was at home watching fucking Netflix, and it didn't matter what it was. It's art. So when I watch something that I'm into, whether it's, again, Ghostbusters or a Fulci movie, whatever it is, it's given me it's entertainment, it's joy, it breathes life. Art gives life, it gives inspiration, it gives more. So to think that that's what brings people down, I listen to 9 Inch Nails, so or Slayer, so I must be psychopath and angry, and no, actually it may, like, if I'm angry, I'll throw on a fucking Pantera album and I'll be
Rage Against the Machine for me.
It's Rage Against the Machine or NWA or whatever the hell it is. If I'm putting something aggressive on, I'm able to just rap along with them or sing along with them, and all of a sudden I feel better. But you got to yell. And like I don't know if you guys have watched the history of swear words yet on Netflix
with Nick Cage.
Yeah, with Nicolas Cage.
I've been meaning to.
They did a great thing on there, this experiment. I was talking to my buddy about it, where they were saying, do swear words help you with dealing with pain? I said, yeah, they do. So they did this experiment where they had a thing full of cold water with ice water, freezing water, and they had everybody hold their hands in the water, and they said, these people over here do not cuss, you cannot swear, and then these people over here could swear. All right, so the people who could not cuss, like they were saying, oh poop, oh ow, they were saying they couldn't curse. They couldn't hold it in there half as long as the people who were like, fuck, shit, god damn it. Like the cursing allowed them to deal with the pain.
Yeah.
The release. And that's the thing. We need to release that anger and that aggression. Cursing feels good. It just feels better. And watching horror, watching violence, watching these things sometimes just feels good. Again, Stone Cold Steve Austin. It feels good to watch him flip off Vince McMahon and kick his ass. It feels good to watch someone knock an asshole out. Like that's what it feel good.
I suffer from I suffer from depression and anxiety, and I had a really bad day Wednesday, I think, and for different reasons. And what kind of helped pull me out of it was I watched two movies. I watched Guns Akimbo and The Wolf of Snow Hollow, and those movies just made me they made me forget about what was bringing me down. You know what I mean? Like those movies, like kind of helped pull me out of my depression because I was enjoying them so much.
Yeah, and that's what entertainment's for, in my opinion. My wife died in 2017. You know what I did? I buried myself in horror and comics to fight back the pain that I was going through, to move my mind to something else. And horror didn't make me want to go out and start, being a slasher killer, whatever, a murder death killer. It didn't make me want to do anything like that. It helped me cope with what was going on. It helped me. And so even growing up, my dad wasn't around, and my mom worked constantly. You know what I did? I watched fucking every Sunday night. I watched Nightmare on Elm Street, 1 through 5, or I'd watch Halloween or Friday the 13th or a number of the vampire movies I had. Horror was a way that helped me cope with any issues I've ever had. I mean, sure, I could have done that with Star Wars or whatever else, but for some reason, horror is, like Stephen King said, it's a safe place. We had a comment up here that I wanted to get to, but yeah, I mean, horror. Seriously, the Horror Syndicate alone helped me get through losing my wife for the most part. I mean, it was more than the comics. It was the Horror Syndicate, with talking to my friends about horror, writing articles about horror, and watching new horror movies. And at the same time, how did we cope with the 2020 part of the pandemic? Because of course it's still going. We had 2 shows a week. On horror, and it was helping us get through it, and we were helping other people get through it, I think, a little bit too. We have a question.
But the thing is, like, horror very rarely has an effect on me where it would depress me. There's only a couple movies I could say, like since becoming a father, there was a period of time where I couldn't watch Pet Sematary for a while. The end of The Mist, was kind of an emotional one, but for the most part, horror doesn't have that effect on me. Watching horror movies doesn't depress me. Even those movies, I couldn't watch Pet Sematary for a while, but it didn't ruin me for a day or a week or whatever. I just moved on. Horror's it's a great
escape
medicine.
Yes.
It's like Freddie shaking his wife. It's good medicine. She's got to take her.
Right.
There's one movie that I've got to tell you that's more depressing than anything I've ever seen in my life, and it was Less Than Zero, Robert Downey Jr. That made me more sad. And I watched that shortly after my wife died. That made me more sad than any horror movie ever had any effect on me. That like had extreme effect on me. Like I was depressed after watching that shit. I don't know if you guys have ever seen that movie. It's very tragic, and I mean, horror movies for the most part are fun. I mean, slashers are mostly fun.
That was that was the realization that got me over my fear of horror. Was cause I didn't grow up watching them, and I was timid about it. And then one night in 1986, I think it was like me and my dad were up late. My sister and my mom are in bed, and we're flipping the cable channels, and here comes this movie called Return of the Living Dead playing.
Oh yeah.
And we sat up and watched it together. And my dad and I didn't watch a lot of movies together, but we had a fucking blast with it. I mean,
And you
just
bonded over it, I'm sure.
it was like, yeah, it was like the next day all we could do was talk to my uncle and tell him all about it at a birthday party. We went to my cousin's birthday party, and we were just talking about it, and just the shared joy between it, and just the fact that I was scared, but then I had a blast with it. And then that just became this common thing. I that was what led me to say, all right, I'm going to try the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. And I watched Nightmare on Elm Street 2 and 3 on one night, and scared to watch them. But within 5 minutes of watching it, I was in love, and I was happy, and I was excited, and I was, again, there's also a, going back to our natural instincts of facing fears, dealing with fears, those natural things that we have. When you watch a horror movie, it's a test of that. You're testing yourself. And when you get through it, there's an accomplishment. There's a feeling of, I survived that. I got through watching, Dawn of the Dead, or I got through watching those movies, The Exorcist. I got through it. I may be a little rattled, but I was able to move through that. And I think that also translates over to our normal lives. Is they say a lot of people who expose themselves to these things are better prepared to deal with violence and things in real life. We're like, if bad things are happening, just like I've heard a lot of people say, like during this COVID thing, a lot of people who are like horror fans and things like that have been able to manage and deal with it better than people who aren't, who don't face death. And that's what we're facing in horror. Horror is about our fears of death, and dealing with death, and dealing with loss, and dealing with grief, and dealing with all these things are played out in horror. And that's something that you don't see in a comedy often, or a drama often. You see it in horror. We're dealing with life or death situations. We're dealing with racism. We're dealing with sexism. We're dealing with, just so many themes and so many different things that are played out at its most extreme. And it gets the reaction out of us. It makes us feel empathy for our characters who are living through. That's why a lot of people who if they don't like a horror movie, one of the main reasons people say I didn't like that horror movie is because I didn't care about the characters. I didn't connect to them. I didn't feel empathy for them, because they need to feel about it. Yeah. So what's Roman saying?
I'm glad to see Roman here. We miss having you on the show, Roman. You got to come back on.
Dissecting our love for horror is important, but the real issue lies within those who impose the stigma. It's great that we all take time to analyze the movies we love, but do you think this type of critical thinking is coming from those who think horror is wrong? I say hold up a mirror to the naysayers.
Mm-hmm.
And the mirror thing in itself is what horror is. Artists are historians. We tell stories. We just show people who we are and what the world is. It's all a reflection. So that's what, like, I always tell people that, like, if I would, because I've written stuff. I mean, we're all three writers, and if you ever tell somebody or show somebody something you've written, or a movie, whatever the hell it is, and you get those people like, I don't know, how could you think of something like that? Like, I was telling somebody about this torture scene I wrote in this book, and they're like, I don't know. And like, look, there is nothing that I can think of that someone hasn't actually fucking done to somebody. Thing is, just because it's in my head doesn't mean that I want to do that. It means I'm possibly thinking, what's the worst thing I would not want someone to do to me? What's the thing that scares me? Mm-hmm. So I put that into the film. Not that I want to do that to somebody, but I don't want it done to me. Like, how do I deal with those fears? How do I deal? I don't understand violence because I'm not violent. So the only way I can cope and handle violence just like everybody. Why did people make up gods, and why did people make up religion, and to deal with the things they don't understand and they're afraid of, they have no answers for. And that's how we do it, and that's what we do with horror. I don't understand how Ted Bundy can do what he does, but if I can explore it and try to understand it, I can better cope with it and be able to maybe face it if I ever had to. Hopefully, knock on wood, never have to.
Right.
But that there's so much that goes into that, and I think some people are just like, no, because you're getting too close to it. You're getting too close to Satan. You're getting too close to the dark. It's going to consume you and envelop you. It's like, well, you can't have light without dark. They both coexist.
Yeah.
I don't understand. Like we've talked about the Bible. Like the Bible is full of horror. The Bible's full of evil. The Bible's full of these tests and these things, these life lessons, and these things that we have to face and overcome. And so it's all relative. It's all part of storytelling much, much older than Edgar Allan Poe or Stephen King or H.P. Lovecraft.
You guys, I gotta pee. I'll be right back.
Go ahead, Seth.
Well, I see a comment that I actually really agree with, and this is from Chloe T. Yeah, basically, people use horror movies and horror as an excuse, as a reason to justify certain things without taking responsibility. Like Chloe says here, horror movies aren't responsible for our actions we take in real life. People like to forget this and blame horror movies or violent games, when really that's not the case. Horror is the safe place. I totally agree with that. To me, it's just people need to find an excuse, and this is a big problem with the world too, is no one wants to put responsibility on the individual. We have to find this bigger than life excuse. This happens all the time with, not to get too controversial here, but like anytime there's like a mass shooting or something like that, instead of blaming the individual, we always look for the excuses of what caused the individual to do that, and people tend to go towards violent movies or video games, stuff like that, Yeah, it's just an excuse.
Yeah, it's totally finger pointing in the wrong direction, because like you said, if you can't take a healthy human being who has been raised right, who's got nothing but love, who's been taught right from wrong, who has had good teachers, good adults in their life, good support, again, love, compassion, has been taught all these things. You can't show them Texas Chainsaw Massacre and all of a sudden there's fucking psychopaths who are ready to murder kittens. It's not going to happen. Somebody has fucked them up.
Wait, you didn't build a bone room after seeing that, like I did?
This shit comes from the people in their lives failing them or hurting them, damaging them. If these people are that damaged, someone has fucked them up. It could be mom and dad, it could be an uncle, it could be a teacher, it could be a bully, it could be who knows who. But somewhere someone's fucked them up, and it's not the movie's fault. It's not Wes Craven's fault. Somebody got there and damaged that person and created a monster. And they're just looking for a fucking trigger. And maybe sometimes art can be a trigger, but you can't. At that same point, it's like, here's a gun. It's your will to pull the trigger. It's not like the film may be a gun, but the person's pulling the trigger. It's not the filmmaker.
Guns don't kill people.
That's the thing. Again, and that's not even. I don't even with gun because that's a whole complicated thing. But the thing is, here's your car. You can go run somebody over with it if you want, but if you're fucking sane and you've been trained right and you've got the right going on, you're not going to do that, because it's just not how we are. So you can't tell me that watching a Tobe Hooper movie or reading a Clive Barker book or listening to an Alice Cooper album is going to make me kill myself or kill somebody else or whatever. It's just not. It doesn't work that way. Someone was already on that path before they got there. Just like Taxi Driver, I'm a big Taxi Driver fan. We've talked about it on the show. Travis Bickle was moving towards violence, and the whole thing of that movie is he can be a savior or he can be a monster, and he comes to that fork in that road, and he could have went either way, but it wasn't because he saw a movie or read the wrong book or whatever. It was like he was already moving towards that because he was a damaged person. He was already on a trajectory to doing something awful, and it just happened to be violence was going to happen. So these people who go out and shoot people, a lot of times, what is it? It's the people who are angry. They've been pushed by other things. They've had things put in their head, or they feel worthless. They feel alone. They feel like they have nothing else. They want to be heard. They feel invisible. Movies didn't make them feel that way. People made them feel that way. The people in their life, the people around them, made them feel that way.
Yeah,
and that's the problem. It's not the art. Art is just reflecting. Again, it's reflecting humanity. Humanity is where the problem is. The way we treat people, all the anger, all the division, all the shit that we deal with, all the prejudice, all the hate, the rage, the bullying, all this stuff is what's creating these problems within people. And I mean, everybody knows this. This is just common sense.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the human race is pretty much, it's very primitive to begin with, and we have laws and, morals and religion even to kind of tame that primal nature within us. And just there's times where that doesn't work with certain people because, like you said, they're already damaged by other people and other things. It's a shame.
Well, one of the worst things about the people
it's always the devil. It's the devil.
Yeah, the devil's in the details, Bev.
You have to believe in the devil for that to be. Like they accuse Wiccans of being devil worship. Like they don't even believe in fucking the devil.
Yeah.
That's an easy scapegoat, though. I mean, the devil and religion, and what I was going to say is some of the people who do say damaging things to us don't realize that they're saying they're damaging us further when they do this, and it's the same thing like Nate kind of talked about it, racism or sexism, or it's not as like maybe some people will take it more to heart. Like I know, Seth, that when some people said things to you, you've gotten down about it. I know I have too. That girl that said that, oh, he's way into horror, that really fucking got me. It's like, wow, that's all you see from me? I mean, and there's people who may know you for many years and find out you're a horror fan and think that you are deranged. And it's like, really, you think that? You've known me, like Seth, you're 37. It's like you've known me for 37 years and you think I'm deranged? Seth, I've known you for 2 years, 3 years or something like that. I know you're deranged, but no, I wouldn't even get that from you,
Well, that's the frustrating part too, is especially when it comes from people who are, close to you or who you think you're close with. You know what I mean? It's like,
right.
Because I say a lot of dumb stuff on social media, especially. But it's just like, I'm not going to say exactly what I posted, but, I posted about something that's a controversial topic. And I feel like I had to put in there, like, by the way, if you think I'm all these things because I'm making this point, then you don't know me. Because, I mean, I get that a lot, and not to bring politics into it, but, I've been pretty much accused of being Republican because I've been critical of the left, lately, stuff like that. And it's like, when people who you think know you are making these accusations towards you or saying certain things, someone's saying something to me recently about, horror causing my depression. I'm like, you don't understand. You don't seem to know me, for starters. One, and I don't like all of us. We're not just horror fans. We're fans of many fucking things. We love Star Wars. I watch the James Bond movies all the time. Spider-Man and all this superhero stuff. Like, You know, we're not just all about horror. We're not fucking. It's not like we're all fucking walking around with robes and fucking slaughtering cats and making sacrifices. You know what I mean? It's ridiculous, and it gets to be frustrating when people who are close to you say certain things. You know,
I think small-minded people tend to project that on other people and think that everyone is one dimensional. I can fit you in this little box, like you said. Like, oh well, you feel that way about that topic, so that must make you a radical right-left guy, or right-wing guy, or you feel this way, so you must be a snowflake, or you you agree with this policy, so you must be this. No. I don't belong to your fucking categories.
Yeah,
I don't belong. I'm not just a horror fan. I'm not just a Nightmare on Elm Street fan. I'm not just this. Like I like art. I like story. I like all of it. I grew up on all the same fucking movies that you grew up on. All right. The only difference between me and some normies is that you're afraid of horror. You run away from horror, and I didn't. That's the only difference. That's the only difference. And it doesn't make me evil. It doesn't make me a psychopath. It doesn't make me. It just means that they did a poll. I was watching this guy. He was talking about they did a poll, and they found that 50%. If you ask 100 people, 50% of the audience would say, "Yeah, I like watching scary movies." The other 50% want nothing to do with them. Okay, I said those 50% are the first people to die in a horror movie. First of all. But the thing is, like, that's the truth. And I always taught, like, people, you know, horror fans have this protective thing, like, where, let's say a critic doesn't like a horror movie. Like, well, fuck that guy. What's he know? It's like, well, no, you got to remember, most people don't watch horror movies. Or when they say this movie's the scariest movie of the year, people are like, it wasn't scary. I'm like, wait a minute. You got to realize that you're desensitized to it. It's like you've been exposed to so much. That's one of the things that drives me nuts with horror fans is that wasn't scary. That wasn't scary. They don't make them scary anymore. Well, look, if you've exposed yourself to this level of, again, what is horror? We're facing fears. We're getting those feelings, those survival instincts, and we've kind of dulled ourselves to it to the point where we need more to feel aroused by it. Like, there needs to be more. We need to go a little further extreme so that it works on us, because when you've experienced something, just like they talk about, like, I hate to say it, but like the sex thing, if you've had sex every way there's possible, like, you can't just say, hey, let's do a missionary. I'm excited. No. You got to go the extreme, right? So that's like horror fans, like, hey, look, I've seen Salo and I've seen Serbian film and I've seen this. So yeah, Paranormal Activity isn't going to work on me. But you hand it somebody who's like watching Disney movies all the time, they're going to be fucking scared shitless of Paranormal Activity. Like, there's different levels of people who, if you're not exposed to it, but thing is, again, we are exposed to it. It doesn't bother us, but it doesn't corrupt us. It doesn't make us psychopaths.
Right, but let me ask you a question. Why do you watch horror movies, both of you guys? I don't watch horror movies to get scared at all. I never do. I don't expect to go into a movie to get scared. And that is fine for some people, and I get why, as Nate said, normies. I call them the straights. You know, like in Ghostbusters 2, you're scaring the straights. You know, but like, you know, I get why they could see things as scary. And we had somebody who worked for the Horror Syndicate who used to bitch about, oh, this is the scariest movie of all time. It's like, dude, you don't understand. To somebody, it might be. The Babadook scared the shit out of some people. Some people thought it was silly. You know, the last movie that really got to me, the last two, It Follows and the Autopsy of Jane Doe, those actually gave me a little bit of the old goosebumps. I'm looking across the room. What's in the dark corner of that room? You know, it does feel good, but I honestly don't watch horror movies because they're scary or because I want to be scared. I hope that happens for sure, but I watch them because of the pure entertainment I get from them. I enjoy watching them. This is a question: can horror be negative in any way? Are there limits? That's a question I want to ask you guys. Do you think horror can be negative in any way?
It can. It can be negative to the right individual. Again, it comes down to the person. It's not, you can't just say it's a blanket thing. Everybody who likes horror is in danger of becoming corrupted by it. It's like, all right, let's look at Ed Gein. All right. Ed Gein, why did he do the bizarre things he did? Well, he was reading them in men's magazines, right? He was reading about headhunters and cannibals and all this, and these men.
Wait, it wasn't because he saw Dracula in 1931?
No, it wasn't. He was reading these magazines, and he was just inspired to do that. But this guy was fucked up. Why was he fucked up? Because how his mother treated him.
Yeah.
His mother treated him that women were evil.
Mm-hmm.
He was fucked up by his mom. And when he lost his mom, the only thing in his world that made sense to him, he didn't know how to just be normal. He didn't know how to live. He didn't know how to exist. And so, yeah, in that solitude, in that absence of protection or whatever it was, he was corrupted by horror, which was the men's magazines, the horror stories that he's reading in there. But did he need that to go out and do what he did? No, this guy was already damaged from the get-go.
Yeah.
You've influenced, you hand somebody who's a pyromaniac a match, he's going to do damage with it. But is the flame to blame for it? No, it's not. It's the guy's a pyromaniac because somewhere his wires got crossed. He got influenced by something. So yeah, I do think that horror can mess people up, but then again, not just horror, because you think about Edgar Allan Poe's kind of the godfather of horror storytelling. Why did if you read Poe, most of Poe's stuff is about premature death, right?
Yeah,
being very morbid, all that. There's a lot of stories in Edgar Allan Poe's work about premature death or premature burial, that kind of thing. Well, it goes back to what he was exposed to as a kid, which is his mother was an actress.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the plays that she did most often was Romeo and Juliet. She played Juliet. So he was a little kid she had to take him to the theater. So he sat in the front row watching his mother die every night and come back to life. Every night, die, come back to life. That became part of his wiring from seeing that as a kid over and over and over. That complication. They've credited that obsession with that theme to that experience as a child. So again, like you said, what scares us? We're all wired differently. We all have different life experiences. Like Seth says, after becoming a parent, he couldn't watch Pet Sematary without being anxious about it, because that's how it happens. A 15-year-old kid who doesn't have any younger siblings or doesn't have any kind of connections to younger, taking care of kids, being around kids, is going to watch Pet Sematary, see Gage get hit by a truck, go, ha, 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 that was cool. But the parent's like, oh my God, that is the worst fucking thing. I can't handle that right now. I don't want to ever watch that again, because you could see yourself up there. You have the empathy for it.
I gotta tell you, Lewis's reaction is more damaging than seeing Gage. I mean, you don't see Gage get hit, but I think his reaction in the flashes, that's what gets me as a parent.
Exactly, too, because going with that, like I finally bought Pet Sematary on DVD a few months after my my youngest daughter was born. So like all that stuff was fresh. So when they showed the photos of Lewis holding Gage, when he was first born and all that, that was like fresh, and that's where it really hit me. And his reaction was very natural. That's where it hit me too. So that's why it took me a while.
Don't say Dale Midkiff's a bad actor ever again. That was one of the most powerful things I've ever seen.
Well, those photographs humanize what you're seeing. It brings it's reflective. It shows you who you can relate to, because those images look so realistic, and that's one thing you got to humanize. It's kind of like that scene in Silence of the Lambs where the mother's on showing pictures of her daughter and saying her name over and over, and they said that's really smart. She's humanizing her daughter. She's not just a thing for him to cut apart. Yeah. She's trying to show Catherine as a person, as a human being, as someone who loves her, cares about her. And that's when horror is most effective and most destroying, is when we feel empathetic, which someone said earlier. It actually shows the goodness in us, that we empathize with these characters and we feel that way. Like I exploded into horror from the Nightmare movies, and it took me years to realize I went to horror when I was being bullied. That at the age of 11, 12 years old is when I was going through depression. My grades started falling down. I started gaining weight. I started feeling really down about myself. I was looking for something that was for me, that would make me feel better. And horror became that. And Nightmare was my gateway into it. And people always say, what is it about Nightmare? Why Nightmare? Why those movies? Well, not only because they're just so cool and creative and interesting, but they're just about facing bullies and facing that oppression. Facing Freddy is the ultimate bully, and it's right there in the fucking dialogue. When Johnny Depp's telling her how to deal with the dream skills thing, you turn your back on it, you take away the power, and it disappears.
Right? Yeah,
that's what you do to a bully. If you got and it's not just bullies, but anything bad in your life. Anything that's causing cancer or toxicity to your life, that's causing all your pain and your problems and your anger and all these things, if you could fucking find out what that is and you could say, I'm done with you. You're out of my life. I'm turning my back on you. It could be a person. It could be a job. It could be whatever it is. There's something in your life that's causing you all this fucking animosity and pain and problems. And you say, I don't need you. I didn't need you before. I don't need you now. I can move on with my life. You will not rule me. And that's...
And that shows a positive in horror. You can learn even life lessons from horror if you can get into the subtext, I guess. I mean, because that's like the same thing, man. Freddy, that was me and you have that kinship, Seth. I don't know what you grew up on. I don't care. No, I'm just assuming it's Howling 3 all the time, but no, but yeah, it's the same thing. I wasn't being bullied, but like I did learn from Freddy how to deal with people that would tease me. Because I don't know. I can't remember being bullied too much, but I know I did get teased for stuff. Like I don't want to talk about that. But anyway, yeah, I like there's a lot to learn from the Freddy movies, especially the first 3.
Well, cool thing about actually like Seth's really huge in werewolf films and
mostly the Howling 3 and Marsupial.
Well, werewolf films, deal with duality, and the loss of control and anger and aggression, and trying to, because that's the cool thing about the werewolf film is that he doesn't have control, and he loses control, and he feels bad about it. He feels regretful for it. He feels empathy for his victims. He feels wrong for it, and that you could take it to the extreme of I'm ripping these people apart, or you could just be that I'm just a fucking asshole who hurts people that I care about, or I hurt it's like the Jekyll and Hyde thing, I have my good side and my bad side. That's why I like one of my favorite villains in comics was the Lizard. I always liked that Lizard, the character, because
Connors
didn't have any control over what was happening. He was becoming this monster. So that's very, very much like a werewolf film or a storyline where it's out of his control to the point that Peter didn't want to hurt the Lizard. He didn't want to kill the Lizard. He was always trying to pull his punches because he knew that there was no will there. There was no control. This was a person he cared about and who he knows is good, but he has to fight him to protect other people, to protect himself, but he doesn't want to hurt them. And that conflict there was what was really great about some of those stories. And that's the thing with the werewolf film, which is really great, is until you get a story like Silver Bullet, where the werewolf is definitely a piece of shit bastard who knows what he's doing and doesn't.
Now you're gonna rag on Silver Bullet again.
But again, the whole thing about American Werewolf is so interesting. Is David, he knows what he's doing and he feels bad about it. And this whole thing is you've got to kill yourself. You've got to take yourself out.
Well, he also gets the constant reminder from Jack, so that doesn't help.
Yeah, but there was like this turn with him because like after his first transformation, and he wakes up naked and he goes back to Alex's apartment. And he's very jovial. He feels good. He says he feels great, and he's very, all cutesy with her. And then he hears about the murders, and you just see that look on his face where he realizes that he did something terrible, and and then he wants to go and from that point on, he wants to do something about it. He tries to get himself he tries to get himself arrested, and then he takes the knife to his wrist. He fails to do that. You know what I mean? He calls his family.
It's like he got it's like almost like I said, he feels great about it. He feels good because sometimes the things that are worse for the worst things for us make us feel good. Like, Stephen Colbert said something the night that Trump won office about how, because Colbert would take his shots at Republicans and Trump and all that all the time. It was kind of his thing, but he had this moment of solace where he was like, we all got kind of wrapped up in this election. We really got angry, and you did. You saw this, like the 2016 election was even worse than this new one in many ways because there was so much anger towards Hillary and there was so much anger towards Trump that all you saw was just people fucking hating each other and just giving each other and just going at each other. And Colbert, to his credit, had this moment where he goes, you know what? It's really easy to get sucked into that. It's really easy to get sucked into that anger and that aggression, and because it kind of feels good. Kind of feels good to tell somebody "fuck you" or cut somebody down or be all that. And he goes, so there's an adrenaline rush. There's a feel good thing there, but at what expense?
Mm-hmm.
Like you're saying, David, this feels good. I feel alive. I got all this energy, but people are suffering because of it. And I'm hurting people, and I'm responsible for this. And maybe I shouldn't have done it. Even though I might feel good to do that, maybe it feels good to tell somebody to go fuck themselves. Maybe I should have shut up. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. Maybe I shouldn't have hurt that person's feelings. Maybe I shouldn't have done what I did. And the fact that he feels the remorse. Again, these are things that you're watching as a kid. You're getting those themes. You're getting those messages through art, through story. It may not be right on the thing, but it's being ingrained in your DNA again. Your evolution as a person, everything that comes about, there's negatives and there's positives, but I think ultimately, like you said, usually good triumphs in the end.
Yeah,
you learn that in these horror movies, that the good person, like someone said earlier about horror films under attack for being sexist and being aggressive towards women and all that, but they don't look at the fact that women are usually the ones who rise above and
triumph over evil.
And you don't see that. It's usually fucking Schwarzenegger taking out the evil. It's not Jenny.
Well, that kind of goes into our society of back then, a sexist society. Sorry, Seth.
Well, I think that's also a misconception from the normies, is that when these people think about horror, what do they think about? They think about slashers. They think about slasher tropes, like exploiting women and violence and stuff like that. And these people have no fucking idea what they're talking about, because horror, especially slashers, it's female empowerment, pretty much. You have the smart, strong female who fights back and all that. Like, I think the people who are against horror, especially, I think they generalize not only what the genre is, but also how us fans are, and how we feel about them, and how we take them in.
And they've also been brainwashed and conditioned to believe that stuff is bad and bad for them.
Yeah.
That you're not supposed to watch that. You're not supposed to listen to that. You're not supposed to do this. Why? Because it's bad. Well, who said it's bad? Well,
there's
they did.
God
says it's bad.
Or your parents or Jehovah's Witness. Hey, I want to get to this question real fast. Jeremy Tidwell says, if someone said they don't understand horror or don't get why you love it, but asked for a recommendation or recommend one to change their mind, what would you recommend and why? Do you guys have an idea of what don't say The Howling.
It would definitely be the Howling 3, the marsupials, which I would highly recommend to every normie out there. Because, that's a loaded question, because it all depends.
Sure.
It depends on what that person's looking for. It depends on what that person's scared of. So, like, for example, like,
would you show a hardcore Christian The Exorcist? You know, but like, no, I don't think so.
And if you're not religious, you're not afraid of that movie.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's exactly what I was going to say too. Is it's like me personally. Okay, so I don't believe in stuff like this. I don't believe in demonic possession. I don't believe in ghosts even. What scares me is home invasion. So that's why something like Halloween or even Your Next will have more an effect on me than say The Exorcist or any of the possession type movies. It really depends on the individual and what scares them. And what I would recommend is something that I think would probably get under their skin a little bit. I wouldn't recommend something extreme.
Yeah.
But
I ask them, like, what scares you? Like you said, like if you watch if you say, well, someone breaking in my house and trying to kill my family, well, let's watch this movie here that kind of faces that fear, and you will go through it and you will face it yourself. And at the end of it, you will come out of it having survived it, having touched upon it, having faced that. And it's not, you may even feel kind of like you just got off a roller coaster ride. Like, my heart is going, I can breathe, we're fine, I'm safe, those actors are safe, everything's safe. And we faced it together. We had a thrill, and we've had this experience and we've gotten through it, and we've just, fought off the bear back in the old days, and we can go back to our village and talk to our families and sleep tonight, having survived that. And that's the thing. We as people today don't have those same. There's almost a part where, like a lot of people say today, people have a depression because there's no motivation. There's no, reward in some ways for people, because some people feel like they're not living life fully, because there were challenges and there were things and obstacles and tasks that we had to do to just survive day to day 100 years ago that we don't have to do now. We don't have to provide food for ourselves. We don't have to.
We're no longer the hunter-gatherers.
Yeah, we're no longer. But that's still, again, in our DNA, that dealing with death, seeing blood, having blood on our hands, all these things were part of our evolution as predators, as carnivores, as just human beings, as an animal. And these are times in these movies, just like an action movie, just like anything that deals with violence, we're getting close to that part of ourselves that we don't normally experience. And thankfully we don't have to. We can safely experience it in a movie theater, and no one's dead, no one's hurt, no one's gonna die.
And that's the beauty of any movie. You don't like The Hunt. I just watched that the other night. I don't ever want to know what it's like to be hunted by other people, but I got to experience what it could be like on the movies. On a movie. That movie is fantastic, by the way. This guy again, Jeremy, asks, so would you challenge? Yeah, I think that's right. How do you ease somebody into horror?
It really depends. You got to kind of know the person who's asking this. You got to kind of know the person who's asking this, and if they're sensitive to certain things or not. Like my children, I ease them into horror. Like years ago, I introduced them to the Universal Monster movies.
Yeah.
And of course, my youngest was obsessed with Scooby-Doo, which is like a prerequisite for horror. But the way I look at it is, it's like,
you can't show an adult. You want to get into horror? Here's Scooby-Doo.
No. But at the same time, too, it's like, well, what's the point of recommending something safe?
Yeah.
You got to kind of face your fears head on sometimes. I mean, me personally, I'm terrified of heights. But when we go to an amusement park, like, I'm definitely terrified of heights, like really bad. Like, I'll shut down. But the first thing I do when we go to an amusement park, I go straight for the fucking roller coaster. So I go on the roller coaster, I get off, I get myself a beer, and I have a good time.
Yeah, you clean your pants off from pepping your pants, and
and you feel,
I wipe my butt.
Yeah. and you laugh and you feel like that feeling of I survived that. I'm alive. God damn it, I'm alive, and I got through that. And that's what the adrenaline junkies go for. So there's a little bit of adrenaline junkie in horror fans. Some people are like, I don't want nothing to do with that. I don't want nothing to do with that. And like, okay, that's cool, but this industry goes far beyond what people think. Like, people go to these haunted attractions every October by just carloads, and like
normies do that too. It's not horror fans; it's normal people doing it
because they want that experience and that communal experience. Everybody's there together, waiting in line. Everybody's out there laughing and joking around, and then they get through it, and they're all like, you grabbing a stranger, and you're like, they get together. And then you come out laughing. That's the thing. Everybody comes out.
Exactly. It's good for you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an experience. You faced something and you've survived and you've gotten through it. And that's the thing to me that is magical about the horror genre, is that you go through something as you watch those movies. I can watch a drama and come out crying my eyes out and feeling depressed and just like, oh my God, this is terrible. Or I can go through a horror movie, feel apprehensive, go through it, scream, feel fear, feel empathy, feel all these things, but come out the end going, whew, and that was great. I feel good. Like I said, getting off that roller coaster. That's what it feels like. Horror, I think they say horror and comedy are the two genres that get that reaction out of you. Yep. Or even sometimes action, like you come out of a movie theater like, hey, I feel like I could like be Bruce Lee and kick somebody's ass right now. Not really. You're not really going to do that. But you have that motivation, like, hey,
like,
I wonder what I could do if I was.
I'll never forget walking out.
I walked out of Fury Road and wanted to drive my car really fast.
Walking out of Fast and the Furious, everybody was like with their little, hatchback cars trying to drive really fast and show off in the park. It's like, get out of here, dude! You got a fucking Ford Escort. Come on. Or a Ford Focus for the younger kids watching. But but like going back to easing people in, there's a conversation we had, and this is going to be another episode I'd like to do at some point. We can either do discourse or do it on a Friday live session like this. But that age-old question, is it horror? Like, I think showing people a movie like A Silence of the Lambs, or even Seven, since you guys say it's a horror movie and I don't, but showing them like, hey, just so you know, this is a horror movie. Jaws, this is a horror movie. You love Jaws, it's a horror movie. And there's these same people who've looked down on me that I hear fucking Halloween on their goddamn phone in October for the ringtone. It's like, that's from a horror movie, right? And you're looking at me like I'm crazy. It's like, I think that's what I would do. I would show them these movies that are praised by outsiders, if you will, like Jaws, like Silence of the Lambs. Like, these are horror movies, guys. Not The Crow, though.
I mean, to me, it's just like any prejudice. It's a uneducated, unexperienced prejudgment on something, where same thing happens in racism, homophobia, whatever it is. If you haven't experienced it, shut the fuck up. You don't know what you're talking about. And that's really what it comes down to, is like, I remember when I was in college, and we'd have to do our critiques in art class, and we had to put up our artwork. And one of the assignments we had was do an assignment that reflects who you are, what your interests are. So I did myself kind of like drawing a comic book page, because I was making comic books at the time. And then another guy was in my class was wanting to be a tattoo artist, or was a tattoo artist. So he did a tattoo. And so I put mine up there, and the instructor actually said something like, why would you waste your time and your talent on this? Like, any cartoonist can do this, basically is what she said. And then the tattoo guy was like, why would you do this? This is all, like, they painted tattoo art as this sexist, degenerate, the cliches, the stereotypes of people who would have a tattoo. Now everybody has a fucking tattoo, but this is like, 1994. So like, anybody who has a tattoo in 1994 is a stoner or a biker or a roughhead or something like that, right? So they were prejudging who he is based on what he wanted, prejudging the whole art of tattoo art, the whole history, the whole everything, all the possibilities of tattoo art, going to, you know, the naked chick on your arm with the, you know, mom, all that. Like, no, it's far beyond that. There's a whole art. So, and then the same with me. Any cartoonist can do what you just did. That doing that comic book art. And like, you have no idea what the fuck you're talking about. I didn't cuss, but I stood up for both of us. Like, look, just because you don't understand this art form doesn't mean that there's no value there and that there's no substance there. You could give a comic book artist any script and he can draw everything in that script from his imagination. Can Van Gogh do all that shit now? I mean, all this stuff. Like, you tell me to appreciate Jackson Pollock, who just tossed fucking paint on the canvas, tell me I need to respect that, but you can't respect this form, this art form. Yeah. You don't have any respect for this or understanding because you don't understand it. You don't understand horror. You don't understand what people are doing. Have you ever sit down and listen to Wes Craven talk? Have you ever sit down and listen to Stephen King talk, or any of these people who can talk to you all day long about this genre and the history of psychology? Have you talked to psychologists who studied this form? Have you talked to did you understand what you're talking? No, you don't. So why don't you shut your fucking mouth before you start judging me?
Well, it's because they
learn something.
There's a little bit of fear in there because you fear what you don't understand, right? Yeah. And that's what you say. The funny thing about what you just said about have you ever listened to Wes Craven talk? Think about what Robert Englund was expecting when he went to meet Wes Craven for the first time, the master of evil. You know, he read the script for Nightmare, and he was expecting to meet not a guy who came out of a fucking GQ catalog or whatever, you know. And Wes Craven, he's a fucking extremely intelligent man.
Yeah. He was a psychology major.
Yeah, well, he was a teacher at one point, wasn't he?
Yeah.
A professor.
Yeah. The sweetest people in the world are the people who are working in the horror genre. Like just like the nicest, sweetest people in the world. And like that's the thing. Like, have you had a conversation with them? Have you talked? My friend Andrew Morris, I don't know if he has this podcast he started last year during the whole COVID lockdown called What the Niche. And he invited me on. I think I was on the third or fourth or fifth episode. But we talked about this subject. He had me on to represent horror. And he asked what are misconceptions of horror. And that's what the whole podcast is about, is everybody compartmentalizing or labeling people. Let's have a conversation about it. What is a misconception of you? Let's really talk to you as a person and see what it is that appeals this to you. And I encourage people to check out his podcast. Again, it's called What the Niche. And he's talked to religious people, he's talked to musicians and artists and filmmakers, and people just, and not even artists, people who are just like, hey, this is just a guy that does this for a living, or this person does this. But what he finds out when you listen to this podcast is like, we're all so similar, we're all the same, we all have the same fears, the same anxieties, the same everything. And who you thought I was or who I thought you were based on that. And that's really what that is. And that's what we get with here. Again, this is just another prejudice. We're not thank God. I mean, really, if I have to be realistic, being a horror fan is not the same as other oppressions. I can walk down the street, although sometimes, like you said, you got your shirt on and maybe you're going to get prejudged, but no one, and maybe you would get harassed or treated differently or looked differently, but it's not the same as someone who can't take that shirt off, that kind of situation.
Right. But at the same time, I will say I have walked down the street or been in a horror movie theater. There's no such thing. Let's change that. Anyway, I've walked in where people like, I love your shirt, when they see a Michael Myers or a Jason, or even somebody recognized my Rosemary's Baby shirt, which blew me away. I don't know if you guys ever seen the Atomic Cotton Rosemary's Baby shirt. The only way I don't know that anybody could get that it's Rosemary's Baby, but I got a high five from that a couple years ago, and just at my kid's school. That's a badass shirt. I'm like, you know what it is? Yeah, Rosemary's Baby. I'm like, okay, I love that. But more often than not, if I'm wearing anything that's representative of horror, I don't like people look at me strange. Like especially when I'm with my kids. And my kids wear the Horror Syndicate shirts. Reynolds loves Friday the 13th, wears that stuff to school. One of his teachers actually had to talk to me about that. about his love of Jason. I mean, he loves the icon more than the movies itself, because Jason is a fucking icon. He's just as iconic as Batman at this point, And I was like, no, there's nothing wrong with us. There's nothing wrong with me. I mean, we just enjoy watching things that give us emotion. And horror gives you emotion. Like I said at the beginning of the show, you can go through all of the emotions in horror. You can there's drama that can make you kind of sad. There's you can laugh. There's a lot of horror movies nowadays make you laugh, and you can be scared, and you can come out on the other end feeling pretty good about yourself. I know I did when I was a kid, especially. My mom kept throwing shit at me when it came to horror. Like, oh, you like Nightmare on Elm Street? Check out Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 6-year-old.
And and the thing is, you got to face those things with that protection there at your side to explain it to you, to make you feel safe with it.
And that's how I do it with my kids.
Yeah, that's how everything is. If you have trained your kids, if you have taken care of them, if you've been there and offered a safe place to experience and not be, it's the people who have things hidden from them. They're not exposed to things. They don't understand that, they fear it because they don't understand it, because they haven't been exposed to it. That's where the damage comes in. That's when the knee-jerk reactions and the prejudging and the hate and the fear and all those things come, because you've been oppressed of it. It's been held away from you. So, should you not expose your children to curse words or violent films, or should you not expose them to things that make other people uncomfortable? Should you not just different types of people, different types of culture, different types of everything? Should you keep it from them, or should you let them say, hey, this exists and this is what it is, and they're going to be able to deal with it more? But those kids, like, who are so pampered from like everything, like they just, no, you can't watch that. There's something in that you can't watch that. And when they're at a friend's house and someone puts on The Exorcist, they're gonna fucking go nuts. They're gonna freak out. And everybody's gonna think, "What the hell's wrong with you?"
Yeah,
it's like, what? Why is this a big problem that you can't watch this movie? Everybody else has no problem. So, I think it just, I don't know if there's because that's another question you come up. Is it bad to expose your kids to this, or because I'm sure that question came up with me, because I've been in the industry since, like, I got the job at Horror Hound and became a horror filmmaker the same year my daughter was born. So my daughter literally grew up on my sets at conventions. It's been a part of her life
all the time.
Every time we're watching a horror movie, I'm like, I got a picture with you with that person. Like, we got pictures. We met him. We got pictures. Like, because at this point, I've met like almost every icon there is. In a horror movie, with my daughter with me in the pictures, because I always took her with me because she was always there with me. And so, she's on sets and a baby stroller watching us film a horror movie, it's like, so, and and now she's kind of gotten into it now at the right age where, when we saw Us, she was obsessed with Us. And it wasn't an unhealthy obsession. It was a enthusiastic, I want to understand this and dissect this.
Yeah.
And like really get into it, and then she started to take those she didn't copy it, but she took that thought process of analyzing and thinking about things to her own storytelling, where she's blowing my mind as a writer, because she's just picked up and absorbed all this stuff, not in an unhealthy way, but in an educational, thoughtful, empathetic. She's one of the most empathetic people I've ever met. Like, she cares about other people. She cares about, like, part of what her problem with bullying was, why are people so shitty to each other? Like, that kind of anger and that kind of confusion. And she faces it and deals with it to the point where, when I did take her to talk to someone about the things that were going on with her emotionally and all that, the therapist was like, you could be doing my job. Like she understood psychology. She understood bully. She understood how to deal with stuff. She understood what things was going, but we all still need help. Even though we are aware of things, we still need that help. But the fact that she had been exposed, had talked to me about things, and I had talked to her about things, she was better able to sort of handle it and analyze it, because it could have been a whole lot worse if she hadn't had any of that. the fact that she kind of understood it. And when she would hear it from another person, a professional, it was like a reinforcement of that. Like, oh, this isn't just what dad said or what mom said or whatever. Like, this is fact. This is how it is. This is how people are. This is how anxieties are. This is how fears are. All these things. So I think that's again, if exposure to this stuff people think is a negative, but I think it can be a positive in so many ways. I think to hide death, to hide dangers, to hide, that's why we have fairy tales. That's why we have folklore. That's why we have ghost stories and campfire stories to warn our people, our children especially, that the world is and can be a dangerous place. And when the time comes, this is how you're going to deal with it. This is how we have learned to deal with it. And horror films, just like fairy tales, which is all they are, they're fairy tales for adults in some ways. They condition us and prepare us for it, to prepare us for the darkness and the horrible things in life.
Sorry, reading this comment. My wife led a very sheltered and controlled life in many ways. When we got married, I introduced her to seafood. Barf, by the way. Star Wars, John Carpenter horror conventions, and all you can eat chicken wings. Now that's delicious. And 80s horror, and now she had missed. Now she says she had missed out on so. Yeah, my wife too, man. Same thing. Not seafood so much because that's gross.
You know, that's kind of society now. We have to coddle. You know, we can't expose people to these horrific things that are actually going on. You know,
why?
We have to protect the children. But it's
the children.
It's I don't know. I don't like that idea at all. That's why I show my kids movies, but I'm there with them as I show them these movies and we talk about them. You know, sometimes I worry about them because my youngest daughter is a mouthpiece and she loves talking about all this stuff. Like, you know, she's on fucking Zoom meetings with their class and she's talking about The Hunt and she's talking about recently she was like talking about Aliens and Alien 3 and about Newt and Hicks and how they got killed off and stuff like that. You know, she's very enthusiastic when she talks about this stuff. And it's, you know, so far I haven't had any issues with any teachers trying to say shit to me, but, you know, I still worry about it too because I know how soft society is today, you know.
It makes me think of my daughter when she was a Girl Scouts. They were, I think it was around October, they had to write their own horror story. And I remember the troop leader was very worried about what Lily was going to write because of what Lily, like, can't be, I think like, you can't be too scary, Lily. You can't be too, like, because she knew Lily was going to bring the thunder.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because Lily is not sheltered from it. She has a great imagination and she'll write things that adults will be terrified of. So
yeah.
I think having children and being who we are, I mean, it helps. Like, my kids are very interested in watching horror movies, and that's not all they watch. But like I told you, my kids watched Candyman the other day, and they really enjoyed it and had so many questions about it. And that's one of the best parts about it, in my opinion, is one, like, watching movies like that, they ask how things were done, like, were those real bees in Tony Todd's mouth? I'm like, yep. You know, but like, I mean, it also, Candyman deals with mythology in a way, you know, and there's a lot of that in horror. We touched on it before. There's a lot to learn in horror, and I think in some ways, for me, horror helped me be more of a creative person, and, you know, led me to doing some of the things that I do, like writing and. Oh God, are you guys there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are we frozen then?
Can you hear us?
Okay, you guys froze for a second. Yeah. Am I frozen?
No, you're good.
Let it go. Okay. Anyway.
You know what's funny though?
Fucking.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Phil.
Oh, I was gonna say, like, actually, when I first started showing my daughters horror beyond the Universal stuff, they've been very desperate to see Child's Play because of the doll aspect. So I showed them. It was a couple of years ago, the first movie, and they got really scared. My youngest daughter went upstairs and was crying. So I paused the movie, got her back down, talked to her a little bit. I went to the special features and put on the making of feature, and it showed how they brought the Chucky doll to life and stuff like that. Ever since then, my youngest daughter has had no problem at all because she now understands the process of horror movies, and she got an understanding of the fact, okay, this is just a movie.
That's wonderful about this day and age. We have that opportunity. We didn't get that.
Well, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
I remember Halloween 2. I've told you guys before about when Bennett Tramer gets smashed by a car. That fucked me up. Like seeing that because it looked real. That messed me up. I didn't know how they did that. But yeah, like the transformation scene in The Howling with Quist. That when my son and my niece were watching that, they were like freaking out because of the pulsing and we were like, hold on, let's show you how because they had a great on the Scream Factory, which Nate did the cover, I believe, didn't you? For The Howling. Yeah, the Scream Factory has a great documentary of how the making of some of the effects, and it's like I wish I had that when I was a kid, even though it didn't bother me really, except for there's a few things like for some reason a movie called Terrorvision scared me, but like I think it's great that we can, like Helena, when we were watching Paranormal Activity, she watched all of them with me, and she just like there's a scene when Katie gets drug out of bed. She's like, how'd they do that? And she's like, probably a guy in a green suit, right? I'm like, maybe I didn't even think about that. Like she thinks about how they do things, and I kept thinking, like, I remember the night we saw the second Paranormal Activity, and my wife loved ghost movies. Those were like her bread and butter. She was terrified of werewolves, by the way. But we went home, and that one, it was right after Reynolds was born. My son was born, and that one dealt with the baby in the crib, and there's a part where the baby gets lifted out of the crib, and the dog, and we had a dog that always laid in Reynolds' room, and it was very, very much, relatable to our situation. Freaked her the fuck out. So she had dreams and nightmares about that. So I'm worried about Helena. Like, God, I mean, ghosts. That's the big question. Are ghosts real? Because they watched the stupid ass Ghost Adventures show. That's my opinion. But they kind of think that ghosts are real. Is she going to wake up in the middle of the night? No, man. She kept trying to analyze how they did the stuff that they pulled off. Like in the third movie, there's a scene where there's somebody under a sheet, and the girl turns around, and the sheet just drops. She's like, how'd they do that? And like that was, so she wasn't scared at all. I was very happy because she was more interested in knowing how they did things than being scared about it. And she would tell me, like, don't worry, I know what they're doing here. I love that. I love that.
My youngest daughter's the same way. Like, she's always trying to figure out like the how of how they pull this stuff off. It's great.
I still ask how they pull stuff off. So
it's just great though, because like it was her first experience with a real horror movie, and she was scared, and then I showed her a behind the scenes thing, and then she became very enthusiastic, and she's always asking questions. She's very inquisitive. I think my youngest daughter could probably be one of the Scream killers.
Well, we're about an hour and a half here. Do you guys have anything else you want to touch on, or start wrapping this up a little bit? It's been a pretty good show, in my opinion.
Probably wrap it up.
Yeah.
Or am I frozen again?
You're fine with me.
I think my internet's starting to be a shithead. Is it? You're coming through. So how about we do some final thoughts on the subject, and maybe can you name a movie that you would show somebody to try to sway them to, like, horror's not bad? Like, I know we had that question earlier. I think that's almost an impossible question because we talked about you want to challenge somebody with what might scare them. And seriously, there is like, especially when there's something that terrifies you, there's a survival feeling at the end. Like, I'm a survivor of You're Next or whatever.
I think I would show them.
What do you think?
I think I would show somebody the Texas Chainsaw Massacre because it's not gory. It would kind of kill that belief that a movie like that is ultra violent, blood soaked. That the movie, I just think it works. I think it's to me that was the birth of the modern horror film, in my opinion. I think it's a good representation of the old and the new, because it is a gothic horror. It is
Doesn't always work.
Also a modern horror. But I don't know. I think in many ways, I think it has to be that person's choice. I think they have to choose to face it. It's like trying to drag somebody onto a roller coaster when they don't want to do that. Like, they have to be ready to face that fear. They have to be ready to go skydiving. You can't just throw somebody out of a plane. You can't throw somebody in the lake because Jason may pull them under and traumatize them, right? So I just think it has to be, like, again, it was my decision. I just one day just told Mom, I want to watch the Freddy movies. They're coming on, and I want to watch them, and I did. And I sat there a little apprehensive, and then by the end of it, I was a diehard fan who was just like, I want more. I want more horror movies. Let's go to the video store right now. I want to rent something. And that's how it was. And I remember, like, showing my nephew Nightmare on Elm Street. I went to the drive-in and they were screening it, and he was very scared. And I said, trust me, Jacob, you're going to love it. He's like, oh, no, I'm just really nervous and scared. I'm like, I swear within 15 minutes, if you're not enjoying it, we will go back to the other screen, because there are two screens, and we won't watch this movie. And we sat there with lawn chairs and we watched Nightmare on Elm Street, and I look over and he just totally enjoying the shit out of it. And eating it up. I said, what I tell you, you face those fears, and that's what happened to me. I was terrified of Freddy Krueger, but I hadn't seen him yet. I just knew what was in my head, what I was afraid of, and I faced it. And when I did, I was laughing and having a blast, and I was just obsessed with it. And that's where I transitioned from being someone who was totally afraid to someone who was like, give me more. I want to see where else this can go. Because to me, the thing that was so different about horror was that it was different. There was nothing like it. Nothing made me feel that way. Nothing challenged me that way. Watching, like, I'm not challenged by watching movies outside of horror. Like, horror challenges me. Even to this day, there are movies where I'm like, do I really want to watch Hellraiser right now? Am I really ready in that mindset to watch this? Am I really wanting to watch The Exorcist at this moment? I can't just put that on casually. Some people can. Some people put their favorite horror movies on as I'll go to sleep every night watching Serbian film. Okay, great. Some people are that way. But me, there's still films that I'm like, you know what? I don't know if I'm prepared to put myself through that at this moment.
Got to be in a certain headspace for that one. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I'm the same way. There's a few though that I can just throw on, like Jaws or The Shining, that I can just sink right into anytime, or maybe even marsupials. That joke's never gonna get old. Just so you know.
Some of them are comfort food. Again, like, if you feel shit, you're having a bad day. Like I said, I'm having a bad day. I threw on, Friday the 13th Part 3, and I had a blast, and I felt better, and I forgot everything that was bothering me, and I don't feel like I'm going to go murder somebody with a hocky mask on.
No, not at all.
No, I feel like I'm going to go make some popcorn and watch the next one. That's what I'm going to do.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's like my ultimate comfort movie. Now, like I've said before, and you guys know, I am a diehard, absolute Star Wars fan. But my comfort movie is A Nightmare on Elm Street 4 Dream Master. I can watch that anytime, and it always makes me feel better. And a little bit of Lisa Wilcox in my life doesn't hurt at all either.
And probably, I don't know if we touched upon that.
So what about you?
It probably has something to do with when you saw that movie and your experience and the time and the people and things around you in your life that was going on. Maybe you watched that movie with Mom. Maybe you watched that movie with your best friend. Maybe And that's why that's a comfort thing for you. It's not just the movie itself, but so much more involved. So that's how sometimes when I put on Nightmare on Elm Street movies, just the music, the logo, the score, just immediately takes me back to a better, safer, just a time when I was not dealing with all these anxieties and all these life pressures and all these problems that we deal with as adults.
Yeah.
Reasons I would argue why we don't need another Nightmare on Elm Street movie. So thanks for hanging out with us, Jeremy. I appreciate you. Go subscribe to the YouTube channel. Just saying. Anyway, Seth, do you have anything you want to say before we get out of here?
Yeah, I mean, if I was to recommend any horror movie for someone who hasn't seen horror before, I would probably recommend The Howlin' 7, New Moon Rising, because there's nothing more terrifying than all the line dancing in that movie. Okay? It's fucking terrifying. All right? No, I don't know. I have, this was a good show, guys. This is a topic that has fascinated me for a long time. And, especially I alluded to it earlier, but especially in that whole court case involving the book, The Seduction of the Innocent and William Gaines and just, people's narrow-minded views on the genre and stuff like that. It's been a topic I've been wanting to discuss for a while. So it's been great talking with you guys about this. Horror is subjective, so I can't really say what I would recommend to someone who's never seen horror before, looking for a scary movie. Like I said, it would depend on what scares them. But
yeah,
all I have to say is stop being a fucking twat waffle. Stop judging us horror fans.
Yep.
Okay, fuck the fuck off, because we're not all psychopaths.
Nope.
Just because you, in your little tiny feeble fucking squirrel brain, believe we are.
Yeah. Agreed.
I don't mean to be aggressive.
No, you're fine. Go watch Late Phases.
Well, like all prejudice, it's small-mindedness.
Yeah.
All it is. It's ignorance.
Yeah.
Roman, thanks for watching, by the way. Come on the show soon.
Yeah, definitely.
Right? We need to get Roman back on the show. Am I wrong? Yeah.
Agreed.
And Tyler. Got love for both you guys. Amber, he'll be to bed shortly. Okay.
Holy shit, she's still up?
I'm ready to go to bed.
Yeah.
I still got 2 more beers.
I'm getting tired. I'm a little hungry, but thanks for joining us tonight. Thanks for joining me tonight, guys. I definitely can't wait till Tuesday when we get to talk about the Blair Witch. Make sure you get caught up. Anybody who's going to watch that show with us, to hang out, come talk about how you feel about it. If you hate it, fine. If you love it, great. We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about the Book of Shadows, the sequel, Seth's personal favorite, and we'll talk about Blair Witch 2016. I do want to talk about the Curse of the Blair Witch, and if you can't find it, it's on Tubi. It's a documentary that was released right before the Blair Witch Project was released in 1999. It's definitely worth watching. And guess what? All 3 movies and that Curse documentary are streaming somewhere. All different places. The Blair Witch Project's on Netflix. Tubi has that Curse of the Blair Witch. I think Amazon Prime has the Book of Shadows. And then Blair Witch, I think it's on Prime also. So check them out. Come hang out with us on Tuesday. We'll be back to do another show like this on Friday. It's a Friday night show. It's not every Friday. It's whenever we get the chance. And it's going to be topics like this. Tuesdays, we're going to dissect, get into the nitty-gritty of some of the movies that we love. And I think all 3 of us like the Blair Witch Project. So join us then. Hit the subscribe button, please. Nate, thanks for hanging out tonight, man. I really appreciate it. I'm glad you called in because
I'm not in the cold or the ice, so I'm really happy right now. I get to go crawl in bed at a decent hour. Yeah. Texas, stay warm.
Thanks for joining us as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, Texas. Hopefully everything's going to be better in Texas by tomorrow. Start to get better. But yeah, Seth, thanks for coming out and hanging out, and everybody who joined in, really appreciate. We had a good viewership tonight. A lot of great comments and questions. So have a good evening. Go watch some horror. I'm going to do that and maybe eat some food. I'm hungry.
Don't
Have a good
kill
night.
anyone.
Yeah, don't kill anyone.